I have a question. I'm Molly Preston, for anyone in this room doesn't know me. I guess I have a question for, again, the print media outlets. Do you see, what's the fate of newspapers, I suppose? We're always, this conversation is really heavily social media based, and I feel like social media is just going to keep on growing. And I like newspapers. I like that feel. I like that people work hard to make this product. I like seeing them around. I feel like it has a really good place in their society, but I'm also afraid, me, a 22-year-old, I'm afraid that social media is going to overcome that want and desire to have, it's like a comparison to e-readers and books. There's newspapers and then there's Facebook. What are you thinking? How would you keep newspapers around if you had to come to that?
I have those fears as well because I've somewhat rooted my life into Greenville, which you wouldn't always encourage someone to do that, and so my life is very much rooted in Greenville and in the paper. So my long-term happiness and existence relies on the newspaper surviving. So I think the answer to that is some of the things that I was talking about earlier is kind of co-opting some of the strengths of social media and using them as our own. There is definitely a feeling of chafing that happens when traditional journalists, traditional reporters, we go onto Facebook and we see other people who don't have the training, who don't have the experience, that don't have the chops, that are putting out stories, that are putting out information, have truths and stuff that they heard and whatnot. Because we've been through the process, we know how to properly suss out a story, how to get the correct information. But unfortunately, some of those people know what they're doing on the social media, and so we need to watch them, find out how they're building an audience, and build our audience similarly, and sometimes even use them as tips to some degree. Like we're not always going to be the first person to hear about a story. We're not always going to hear about something interesting going on. So we need to keep our ear to the ground in that way to watch those things, find out what ideas they have, what stories they have, and use our skills as traditional journalists to build full stories and get all the information possible on the story. And bring in elements of video and audio to news as well. And finding ways to generate revenue off of that. It's not a fun conversation for me. Like, again, I have a writing background. I plan on being poor, but a lot of my conversations as an editor have to be, so how are we going to generate revenue off that? And social media, big challenge at this point is generating revenue off of these things. But hopefully we're generating interest in our product, pushing people towards it, and once they see the quality of it, they will then invest in us by buying our product and hopefully telling other people about it as well.
I think the demise of newspapers because of social media is vastly over-exaggerated. The same thing with books. There were more books published last year than any other year in history, and that's excluding ebooks. So people want to read, they want to hold the book. They may not want to hold the newspaper quite as much, but a lot of the problem is we curtail our thinking to tack toward the younger population. And to my mind, it's always been a little silly because the baby boomers are the ones with all the money. You all are just potentially going to have a lot of money, and you're potentially, more than potentially a large group. So we've already started pushing everything to, that 18-34 demographic. If I were running a newspaper, I would try to embrace the 40-plus demographic or the 35-plus demographic. And I wouldn't, and I'm serious, I don't care if you're buying newspapers at 22, because like we've mentioned, you don't know anything at 22 based on when you're 35. I often think that nobody should make important life decisions until they've paid an electric bill and they have a mortgage. Until then, we're dumping money down a sinkhole. So the problem with a lot of big newspapers in big cities is they spent too much. They tried to get really whiz-bangy with things. They upgraded technology, and their executives were really greedy. And so you had a lot of big, Cleveland Plain Dealer has this problem. A lot of executives had really fat salaries. They didn't have a strategy with social media and the internet, so they just threw money at it to try to fix it. And then, oh yeah, what happens? Readership goes down a little bit, and then the skies fall. So you have this, then it's the nuclear reaction. Everything's got to change, no more plain dealer, blah, blah, blah. So there needs to be kind of a level set. We're in a changing, chaotic environment. Most people don't react well to changing, chaotic environments. And so this is going to level out. It's going to level out. Because all you 22-year-olds that don't read the newspaper, have never held a newspaper, in 10 years you're all going to have newspapers. You're at least going to go to places like this, to get information on the web. So you still need information. And that's not going to change. Just like you're still going to need books, you're still going to need magazines, even though things are going to change a little bit.
I've heard it said from another professional journalist I got to work with in this past summer that before newspapers die, that if they do start heading down the slope, that before they would die, they would pick up like a cult appeal, basically, kind of like records have. Like, there's no conceivable reason a person my age would own records, but they've got that old-timey feel to them. Do any of you guys have like an opinion on that assumption that, in a way, even if they aren't the most valued media anymore, they will continue solely because they've been around?
People still turn to so let's say the real media, the traditional media. Whenever something bad happens, 9/11 is always the perfect example. You turned on the radio, you turned on the television, you went to the New York Times. You didn't go to this thing that doesn't exist. People still want real sources, they want confirmed, they want professional. I think that plays a part in it.
Yeah, traditional media, we built up our reputation. We've been around for a while. We know that you can come up to us for actual information, whereas following someone on Facebook or Twitter or what have you, you don't know for sure. You don't know what their standards of journalism are. You don't know how many times they've, slandered someone, or you don't know what their practices are. And so, you should at some point at least want to go to an established source for your actual news.
So will newspapers become cult-like? I don't know. I don't think it's ever going to get that dire.
I think it's an interesting idea, like small presses, like maybe a bunch of hipsters will open a small press.
Yeah, like a punk rock movement.
Yes, I think I don't know if it works as easily because the presses have become more economic over the years. Maybe they'll find some way to easily do 100 copies cheaply, but I think it's always economy of scale. I think if you're only going a handful of newspapers, you'd probably be losing money, almost guaranteed. But maybe someone will figure it out.
You think about, go back to the book example. People are self-publishing books all the time, and any one of us, we could get our book self-published in as many copies as we want to buy and try to sell them. But if you want a book, you go to something that's real.
Yeah.
The person writing has been vetted. It's been vetted in many cases by the publishing house. You look at their credentials. So we still, we want that. There's an authenticity. There's we want expertise.
Yeah, and even for the writers, some writers are more comfortable going more independent route. They have more control over their means that way. But you go to a larger press because they can get out to more people, and even with traditional media, we can still reach more people than most Facebook users or Twitter people.
I wonder with radio whether I think that's a really interesting dynamic because Rennell doesn't need Teal's radio station. He could build his own thing a lot, and maybe easier than like self-publishing or trying to create your own newspaper because the technology. With iTunes, you can have your own radio station. How long would it take you to create a radio station?
Honestly, less than an hour.
There you go.
Less than an hour.
And in less than an hour, you could have millions of
Even YouTube. It was actually funny. that Dr. Bachelor brought that up, because I remember before I even brought it to the airwaves, that's the reason how my one show went onto the airwaves. If anybody, I don't know if anyone in here was in my one class thing was like running mass media with Dr. Evans, and we had it in the old MIMT, and we had to do the radio deal with the with Audacity. That's honestly how I got started actually getting into radio. And, you know, once I started that, I made a little Facebook page to it and had my link directed to it. Next thing I know, the thing's giving me, it's giving me back details that they're getting hits in Africa and Australia, Brazil, and everything like that. So I think just in general, but in general, radio is still hurting in a way, because now, a lot of people, they're, just like they're relying with, social media, online things rather than newspaper, and just like with the news, they rather go to Facebook or somewhere else rather than just taking an hour. With certain news, it's just a half an hour out of your evening, watch the news. The same thing happens with radio. They say, well, I only go to radio just to listen to music. If I want news, I'll go to TMZ or I'll just Google it. Well, they're not going to give you everything. You got to realize that they're just trying to get it out there quick and they're on to the next one. They're not going to take the time, like, all of us are trying to do within our own professions, to give you the most in detail while being on time as well, the most in detail news and everything like that as well. Then not only that, but I know myself, as the rest of everyone else up here, within our profession, but beyond the news and everything, there's some type of way we're trying to reach our community, like beyond, like even bringing in from, us delivering news to our national level and things like that. There's still a way that we're trying to reach those that's within our close group of people, our demographic. So, for example, the newspaper might be, sponsoring something where, they're helping out with a charity. Television, they might be doing a toy drive or something like that. Radio shows, you might be giving away free tickets to a concert, or raising awareness for cancer, something that helps out the community. And so, within a way, unknowingly, a lot of people that's around the community that we're mainly reaching, shadowing away from, national-wise, but a lot of people that's in the community that we're trying to reach, without them even knowing, could potentially be harming themselves and their community at the same time, without even knowing it. Because, now they're all, it's all, we're all shadowed up by what's going on in social media, and, instead of reading the newspaper, they can just Google it, and instead of searching all through it, they can just pop it right up. But on top of that, there's other things that we're doing that social media, Facebook, TMZ, any other, small things within social media are not doing, So I feel that, in a way that social media is hurting, not only the radio, but newspaper, television, and et cetera. And I think it's something that, as in our generation, we can put a stop to it now. And I think right now we're at the perfect time where, that's why it's good that we're all here learning, just like I'm learning off of Bree, Colin, Dr. Bachelor. We're all learning off each other. And I think this is the perfect time for us all to now just take the bull by its horns, and now we can flip things back around, so we don't have to say when we're at an even older age, oh, well, I wish I would have did this back then, I wish I would have did that again. We have the chance to turn it around before the generation below us gets to this point, and then you never know. Particularly in certain areas, certain medias could disappear, because then they're going to depend on social media even more. So.
Are you guys doing a lot of news on the radio? And what kind of news are
Right now we're not doing. Right now we're just doing like college news, like what's going on. Greenville things. We like to get the news out. What's going on around Greenville, for instance, at Fresh Grounds, or Stone Arch had something going on that we knew about. But right now we're in the midst of working with an underwriting. Hopefully I have to talk to our advisor, but we want to try to start an underwriting class to where we can start to get these things, commercials, news, and then other things like that. As of right now, we're working with TCTV hand in hand. We get the audio version of their weekly news, and then we'll shoot it through our airwaves. So anything national is going on, we do get their news, but eventually we're going to try to focus on getting the whole underwriting to where they write it and then have someone read it right out of our studio.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm a senior here. I have a question just generally for anyone who wants to answer it. You mentioned that you have to either be right or you have to be newsworthy. Do you ever find a balance between that, and what strategies do you use?
Yeah, it's not actually being right or being newsworthy. It's being first or being right. Because you want to get out there as quickly as possible, but you want to be accurate. So that's a decision that you make every time something big happens, especially for us. We're not going to tweet out every story that we're working on. It's just not useful for our readership and our audience. But when something big happens, there's a big fire, industrial fire last winter, something like that. We make decisions on the cuff based on how do we feel about this information? Are we confident in it? Should we talk to somebody else before we get it out? And that's basically what we look at. Because we've been in situations when there's breaking news like that, it's always a difficult situation. There was a home invasion on Route 18 about 2 years ago where all the traffic on the scanner, every officer on the scanner said that they were searching for someone, that there's a manhunt going on. Turns out the next day, the guy was holed up in the house. There was no manhunt. They knew exactly where he was. We know the publications went to print saying that that there was a manhunt involved. And that's the risk you run. Sometimes it's a bigger risk, but you want to do the best you can to get the best information you can. Sometimes that information doesn't come out for days, and it's extremely challenging in today's. You need the information right now, or people are going somewhere else for it.
Is it damaging at all to have to print a correction in your next edition?
Depends on how big the correction is, and not as damaging as you might think. You want to keep them as minimal as possible because you want to keep this reputation as a source where people can come to for that information. But we watch other media sources, and they may be really wrong. They may be completely off. They may put in correction, and it doesn't seem to damage them at all. So I think, especially if you have a really established reputation, it doesn't affect you too much. But we're small. We're very prideful. We want to make sure we're right every time out to maintain that reputation. So we keep a close eye on that. Say what the exact effect is, it's hard to say, but you just got to try every time to be right.
I think we all make mistakes. I mean, we're all human. You can't be right all the time. I think it goes back to your credibility, and if you have a reputation like Ricker says, your readers will trust you, and most of the time corrections end up being little things like names or maybe dates or things like that. So I think you should always try to be right. You never print inaccurate information, but newsworthiness kind of depends on your reader. What's newsworthy to me might not be newsworthy to Dr. Batchelor or Ron Allen. But I think the combination is, on the cuff, like Caleb said. Are there any other questions?
I'm Jared Johnson. I have a question that's more related to the campus outlets. Do you guys face any problems with censorship? Because I know that the Talencian goes out to the entire campus community, but I know that, and the radio station is far-reaching as well. But the television station is something that is restricted, I think, mainly to students or only to students. So I wonder if you guys feel any pressure to sort of pull back a little bit and not give, or to sort of cater your stories in such a way that will satisfy the audience politically as well as in terms of their own interest.
Right. As far as the radio is concerned, they are regulated through the FCC, so they have very intense laws about their censorship. But as far as the TV station goes, it is it's entertainment. So our news is politically correct. There's no sorts of profanities or inappropriate stories. I mean, everything should be relative and appropriate. And the other thing to take into account is we are a Lutheran college, and we are upholding a reputation of liberal arts and the STEM professionals that work here. And when we broadcast, we have to keep their reputations in mind as well. So there's a sense of censorship, but as far as pulling back goes, we haven't had too many problems with that specific scenario, because I think that if you have the professionalism and the drive and the motivation to, have your own TV show or have your own radio show or be a news anchor, then you probably already uphold standards that don't need to be censored. And I think that we're really lucky in that regard that we have students that, if they're willing to do it, they're probably already mature enough to know that, what they're talking about shouldn't have to be censored. So I think we're lucky in that regard.
The news station has a layer or two of watchdogs when the stories go to prompter, that it passes through a number of eyes that can either agree or disagree on what's PC or not. And if something, even the slightest bit off-putting, does make it to the prompter, even then, in the studio, that can be edited after the fact if there's some talk after the production is concluded that something perhaps a little sensitive has gone on. I know I've been in that situation before where something came up on the prompter I could not bring myself to read, and we just had to start over. And it's not a huge deal, but typically no stories with any kind of, basically any material that could be taken in one way or another. Like, that has at times made reporting a bit dry, but there's never a shortage of other information, or human interest stories are usually what whets the news appetite if just the information starts grating a bit.
Actually, the TCTV, though most people don't realize it, it's our most public news source because we put all the airings on YouTube. So really anybody in the world can see and access quite easily information on TCTV. I think that watchdog administrations across the country are a big challenge, and I think it's hurt student journalism. And I think that if you talk to 100 journalism profs across the country, I think the strong majority would agree. Because censorship does occur on a lot of campuses, it kind of creates a culture in which student journalists are not doing really investigative work, the kind of hard-hitting investigative work that they used to do. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and the Pitt News was its own entity, and if the administration did something that was outside the bounds of what the editorial board believed, they went after them, and they went after them hard. You don't see that as much now. It's dampened, and even at some schools with traditionally strong journalism programs, there's much less kind of investigative, hard-hitting journalism. Those student journalists who are willing to write those kind of stories usually are the ones that win big national student journalism awards. So the value's there, but it's a much different environment.
Even just like a feed up that, I see almost like with some of our hosts that we have for our airwaves, the kind of the whole Big Brother's watching thing could potentially take away from the uniqueness of the radio in general, because there's going to be certain times we have different shows that are based on different things. We have a very broad aspect of different shows. I think right now we have up to 8 different hosts, and they're all 8 different shows. One show might be reggae, another show might just be an entertainment talk show. And especially with entertainment talk shows, there's certain times where, entertainment, mainly it's, around our age range that, we want to hear, Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, or, something like that. And at the same time, where you want to report something that maybe have been quoted or the whatnot, you still have to be mindful of what you're saying, since just like Bree was saying, since we're with the FCC, what we do, and it's funny because we actually have a meeting today for any new hosts, but what we do prior to anyone even getting on air, they have to do, I think it's like 6 hours, or no, 2 hours worth of just class session where we just go over nothing but, FCC and everything, and then after that, they have to do 6 hours of a sit-in session total. Each one of our radio shows right now go about 2 hours apiece, so if they sit through a full, 3 different shows. So they have to do a total of 2 hours worth of classroom session, 6 hours of sit-in sessions, and then 1 hour of a non-broadcasted just mock show, just so we know, and then so they get comfortable as well, because we all know when you get nervous, sometimes you say things you regret it later. So, you know, we try to make them as comfortable as possible. We show them George Carlin, and, you know, we try to make them as comfortable as possible, and then let them know, yeah, you have to watch what you're saying, but at the same time, we want you to be able to have the freedom. And I think that's something that we really try to focus on, and helps our media within a whole, because there's a lot of campuses where they're just anchored down on, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And then they forget that part of being in media is learning how to exercise your critical thinking and your freedom, while at the same time, you know, you have to be professional. But I know we've only had like one situation where, you know, there was a word drop and we have a 5-second delay button, but our DJ at that one point in time, they were just nervous, so something just slipped out the last second. But other than that, we don't have to worry about anything becoming, you know, blatant. We really don't. You know, we give them two shows or so that we'll sit in and guide them, and if they're comfortable after that, we'll unlock the radio station and we'll leave, because that's how comfortable we are, and I think that's a plus, and that's something spectacular and positive to say about Till College, that we have the type of students that usually, in my opinion, the only time you have to focus on, you know, censorship and different things like this, the only time you have to focus on things like that is if you're dealing with people that's not taking what they're doing seriously. You know, like, oh, I don't care, I'm just going to say this, who cares, you know. But I think, you know, as Till College, as students, you know, faculty and staff, we can take pride in that, and knowing that we have students here, you know, speaking around all majors, we have students here that when they put their mind to something, they take it on as if it's a full-time job. So, and that's something that's a tremendous plus, especially within the media communications field, where sometimes you have to, you know, walk real light.
Yeah. That's a pretty good wrap up of Mr. Johnson's question. Do we have maybe one more question for sake of time? Anyone else? Okay. Does anyone else from the panel have anything they want to mention?
I think it's good that you're having these conversations about what journalism is, what news worthiness is, because I think there can be an inclination to only go to Facebook, to only go to Twitter, and when they need real news, maybe they don't know where to go. So it is good to have these, to get this information out there about what news actually is, why it's important, why you need to pay attention to it, because your life will be better if you pay attention to news. I promise you. And so it's good to get that out there. I think it's great that you guys are doing this.
Yeah, for me personally, it's been a great refresher on, you know, really the boundaries of newsworthiness, and even maybe not so limitations, because you never know what your readers will want to listen to. But I think we all gained a pretty good definition of the word, and it's important because, you know, it's always going to be changing. It's always going to be evolving, especially with technology and with the media presence going so many different directions. But thank you all for being here, and thank you all to my professional panel. And we hope to continue this Media Day tradition on in the future. I think we did a pretty good job our first go around. Thank you again.